Good afternoon. This afternoon at approximately 3:35, the Sheriff's Office arrested a Trevor Dooley, age 69, and charged him with 1 count of manslaughter, 1 count of improper exhibition of a firearm, and 1 count of openly carrying a firearm. He has been transported to the Hillsborough County Jail, Central Booking, and I'll answer any questions you have.
Sir, can you explain what happened that afternoon? Did the gun go off accidentally?
There's still some issues that need to be resolved, but what is clear is that Mr. Dooley emerged from his home with a firearm, went to the tennis courts, basketball courts, armed with a firearm exposed, had a disagreement with the victim, and based on the statements of some witnesses, although there were some initial discrepancies, Mr. Dooley took the firearm from his waistband and confronted the victim and fired a shot.
Sir, at what point did the gun actually come out and was visible to anybody who was on that basketball court?
Well, again, there were varying accounts of exactly what happened between the witnesses. Some even didn't even see the gun come out, but saw his hand move towards the gun in his waistband, but never saw it come out. Another witness did see it come out and point at the victim, and while another victim or another witness clearly said the suspect took the gun out and pointed it directly at the victim.
If Mr. Dooley came out of his house with a gun and came over to the victim, why are you only charging him with manslaughter?
Well, the decision on the type of charge was made by the state attorney's office based on the evidence and the interviews conducted in this case as being the most appropriate charge at this time.
Is that because you feel like they got into some sort of fight, or what is it that you think happened there on the basketball court? I mean, what are the circumstances?
Well, the circumstances are pretty straightforward. They did get into a disagreement over another juvenile who had been skateboarding on the basketball courts. What exactly was said between the two, we don't know. That conversation wasn't overheard by witnesses, and Mr. Dooley would not give a statement, so we're not exactly sure what was said between the victim and the suspect. We do know it was a disagreement over one other juvenile and skateboarding in the basketball court.
Did the disagreement ever get physical? Did anybody?
No, there was no indication whatsoever that there was a physical confrontation.
So simply verbal, no physical contact was made?
Exactly, yes.
Did Mr. Dooley fire his gun intentionally, or was there a struggle in which it went off accidentally?
Based on the statements, it appears that Mr. Dooley, when he pulled the gun out, the victim reached for the gun. Again, one can surmise it was in self-defense or to try to take the gun. We don't know. But that the witnesses did see the victim reach for the gun, and then a shot was fired.
Was he licensed to carry? Was it a registered firearm?
Mr. Dooley did have a concealed weapons permit in the state of Florida.
But to return to the original question, when the shot was was it fired intentionally, or when the victim reached for the gun, did it go off accidentally?
The suspect fired the gun. I mean, there's no indication that the victim pulled the trigger to the gun.
You said he hasn't given a statement. Is he cooperating at all, or is his attorney? How would you describe that?
No, he is not cooperating whatsoever.
And he didn't give a statement to you when you first picked him up on Sunday night or Sunday?
No, he didn't. He refused to give a statement from the very onset.
And there is some issue as to why the sheriff's office didn't notify Hillsborough County Schools, since this man is a bus driver. Can you talk about that?
Well, there was a decision made at lower levels that based on his not being arrested, that there was no legal obligation to notify the school board. Quite frankly, we should have, and for that there's really no excuse. We screwed up. It's that simple. We should have notified them and allowed them to make the decision on what to do with Mr. Dooley.
Did Mr. James have a weapon at the time, any kind of weapon?
There's no indication or no evidence that he was armed in any way.
Has he ever had any altercations or any verbal arguments or disputes with other neighbors in the area?
It's our understanding from talking to neighbors that Mr. Dooley had previous issues with neighbors and in the neighborhood. Certainly not to this level, but there had been issues with him in the neighborhood.
Also threatening other neighbors with a gun, just for intimidation per se?
That I'm not aware of, no.
So we've been led to believe that there was the initial confrontation, and then Dooley, someone told us, turned to leave, and then the other gentleman came upon him, and the shot ended up being fired. Is that the scenario you have?
Well, again, one of the things we had to work through were varying accounts of what happened. One witness did say that they thought Mr. Dooley turned his back and then heard the victim make a statement, and Mr. Dooley again turned back towards the victim, and that's when the weapon was drawn. So there were varying accounts, but what we do know based on those interviews is that Mr. Dooley ultimately did turn and reface the victim with the weapon.
So in a sense, there was a re-engagement here.
Well, I don't know that the contact had ended to the point where you could say a re-engagement, or whether it was just a continuation of the event.
Is anyone going to be held accountable within the sheriff's office for not alerting the school system?
Well, I've already dealt with that internally. Again, there is no procedural or legal obligation to have notified him, since Mr. Dooley was not, again, he was not charged with any crime whatsoever. But I think common sense should have prevailed here and made that notification.
Joe, can you offer anything to us with regard to this new standard ground laws contribution to the dilemma that your investigators faced in trying to resolve this matter?
Well, it's certainly an issue that has come up a number of times, and to say it doesn't add a difficult dimension to some of these cases would be somewhat of an understatement. It does make it more difficult, not just for law enforcement, but for the prosecutors themselves in having to evaluate, some of these cases, and that was part of the discussion in this particular instance.
Could account in some measure for the decision not to charge murder.
Well, again, I don't know that was the factor that led to a charge of manslaughter over murder, but it is something that we and the prosecutors have to take into account, depending on the circumstances of incidents such as these.
Because of the confusion and the differing stories, what in particular happened that allowed you to move forward with an arrest today?
Well, there was one obvious interview with the victim's daughter that we couldn't get done until yesterday, late yesterday, and that certainly was critical in being able to interview her, as well as go back with the prosecutors and go over each and every bit of the investigation and try to sort through some of those conflicts in the interviews.
Can you tell us a little bit about what she said she saw?
I couldn't do that at this point, no.
Just to go back to stand your ground for a moment, there's no indication that the victim had a weapon at the scene, but is it still part of the case, perhaps in their verbal argument? Is it still being considered that it might have played a role?
You know, there's so many factors in the cases that I'm familiar with in the past that come into play. There's certainly, everyone's unique. What we do know here is that the victim wasn't armed. There's no indication that he was armed. It's apparent during the interviews that he was at the very least trying to defend himself, if not disarm Mr. Dooley from the firearm when he was shot.
Was there any evidence with the victim having a knife at the scene?
There was a small pocket knife that was located in the scene, but there's no evidence whatsoever that the victim had the knife in his possession. That's one of the issues that we don't know where the knife may have come from. It may have already been there, but nothing indicates that the victim was in possession of that knife.
You said that the stand your ground law probably wasn't the main factor contributing to the decision of manslaughter. Can you explain what some of those other factors were contributing to that decision to manslaughter?
Well, again, the prosecutors, the decision on which charge is most appropriate is ultimately that of the state attorney's office and the prosecutors, and we work with them in presenting the evidence that we've been able to gather through interviews, physical evidence, and we make those charges based on consultation with them.
Docobo, do you have information of if these two, the victim and the suspect, had any problems before in the past?
I'm not aware of any, no.
You've already said that some of the witness statements buried at the beginning, there was obviously kind of a tough case, but some people were still kind of upset that he wasn't arrested at the scene or that it took a couple of days. Can you speak at all to that? Why he wasn't arrested right away?
Well, I can in the sense that certainly from an emotional standpoint, it's difficult to understand why someone who brings a gun to a park and shoots and kills someone isn't arrested. Personally, you know, it's emotionally it's hard for me to make that connection, but you know, we have to let cooler heads prevail and not allow those emotions cloud our judgment in what the right thing to do in terms of the ultimate prosecution, the arrest and prosecution of the right individual is. And while we can certainly understand some of the public in the neighborhoods and the family being upset, emotionally it's understandable, but we want to make sure justice is done, and we want to make sure that we don't do something or we miss something that might ultimately result in a successful prosecution of the suspect.
Do you have a record of calls for service to that park regarding complaints about bicyclers and skateboarders on the park, on the basketball surface? Where neighbors were complaining that this gentleman had been repeatedly verbalizing about that?
I don't have that information. I'm sure we could obtain that, but I don't have that with me, no. Okay, if there's no more questions, thank you very much.